Learn English through interesting stories. The Man Who Changed America, Henry Ford.
In January 1914, Henry Ford decreed that all the workers in his factories should be paid at least $5 a day for 8 hours' work. Any classic economist must have thrown up his hands in dismay at this radical decision, since it amounted to more than doubling wages overnight. In 1913, the average paid to workers in the Ford factory had been just $2.40. But then Henry Ford was not interested in doing things the way other people said he should do them, and he was not the sort of man to stick to classic concepts and tried and trusted theories. He believed that by paying his workers more, he would get them to work better and become better consumers. History seems to show that, in this particular case at least, he was right. In spite of the wage increase, his company grew and prospered. Had Ford not been determined to do what he wanted to do, and to do it his way, 20th century America might have developed rather differently, or more slowly. Ford would have complied with his father's wishes and become a farmer in Michigan, and no one today would have heard of him. Instead, he transformed the automobile from an expensive gadget for the rich into an everyday vehicle within the reach of the ordinary American. Henry Ford was born in 1863 on a farm in Dearborn, Michigan, where his English grandfather had settled after leaving Ireland in 1847. Though Henry's father was determined that his son should become a farmer, Henry had other ideas. By his early teens, he had developed a passion for mechanics and was set on becoming an engineer. Leaving home at 16, he walked to Detroit and became an apprentice, working for various employers and learning about mechanics, steam engines, and in due course, the internal combustion engine. Nevertheless, his father's influence was strong, and at the age of 23, Henry returned to Dearborn to get married and settle down on the farm his father had promised him. The agricultural interlude in his life, however, was short, and within 2 years, Henry was back in Detroit to take up a job with the Edison Illuminating Company. In 1892, the first automobile was built in the United States. Within weeks, Ford, having studied the designs carefully, was hatching plans to manufacture his own horseless carriages. His first hand-built car was completed in 1896. By 1899, Ford had built 3 automobiles, using the profits from each one to help him refine his techniques and improve the performance of the next. In 1900, he helped to found his first car company, which failed within a year. His second venture was no more successful, and after it collapsed, Ford went back to building handmade cars at home. Yet Ford still had ambitions to launch a company that would produce cars in a way that no other manufacturer was doing, by mass production. Rightly, he reasoned that mass production would drastically cut production costs, and thus the price of cars. The first cars produced by the Ford Motor Company in 1903 had a price tag of $850. Nevertheless, though there were plenty of prospective buyers for cars at this price, and over 1,700 were sold in the company's first year, Ford was not satisfied. He wanted to increase production to the point at which the cost of a car would fall to $500. In 1907, the first Model T Ford emerged from Ford's factory. Its success was immediate, and within 4 years the company had brought a second production plant into operation. Then, in 1912, Ford introduced what was his most radical contribution to manufacturing, the moving production line. From that time onwards, instead of having workers move round a factory to work on each new vehicle, vehicles were moved round the factory on continuous lines, and workers remained at fixed workstations, where each had all the tools, parts, and equipment he needed. Car production was revolutionized, and by 1914, Ford boasted that his factory could build a car in 93 minutes. By 1915, over 1 million Model Ts had been built, and 7 years later, the price had fallen to under $300. By the time the vehicle went out of production in 1927, almost 16 million Model Ts had been built, and Ford had achieved his ambitions beyond his wildest dreams.
The end.
Thank you for watching. Hope you learned much. Like, share and subscribe for more stories.